Well, welcome. This is another episode of Never Mind the Chaos. I am Leonard Simpson, partner with 2020 Financial Advisors, joined by my co-host, Michael Chastain of Chastain Jones Law. And we are going to speak with another incredible person out there today, and that's Daniel Schneiderman with Bada Fulkerson Law down in San Diego. Well, good morning.
Good morning. How you guys doing?
We, we're doing well. We're doing well. I understand you had a kind of a sleepless night with a couple of young kids.
Yeah,
That
a
were
2 and a 3-year-old. It's been a busy couple of years. COVID
yeah,
babies.
that's a lot of fun. Well, we're delighted to speak to you today, and really what we want to hear about is is sharing with us and sharing with the audience your journey and your story. So I know you went to you did your undergraduate down in San Diego
I did
or
in
Santa
Santa
Barbara,
Barbara.
Santa
Santa
Barbara.
Barbara. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was a
And you did
UCSB
a
kid.
minor in German
German
history.
history. Yeah. I've
Tell me about that.
well, I my mom is Irish Catholic, Chicago, one of nine
Okay.
from Chicago, all elevator engineers. My dad's one of two, Jewish family from Hollywood. They ended up meeting in medical school. My parents are uh, both doctors. My brother's a doctor, and I'm my sister. She works HR for Walmart, but I'm the lone attorney in the family here. So
Every
personal
family
injury
needs a good
kind of worked
attorney.
out. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but
great.
yeah, I ended up kind of going into German history back at UCSB just out of interest. That kind of
Hmm.
period of time always interested me, and also didn't have to take any real finals. You're mostly writing essays and just learning about that time period, but was really interested in it back in the day and gave you a good framework for kind of history in general.
Do you
Did I
speak
did,
German?
I do not speak German. I should have gone that way at some point. I did French back in high school, and
uh,
always kind of wished I did Spanish or German, but
yeah.
French was great. It still stuck with me a little bit.
Did you do an internship in Spain in Barcelona? Was there something
Yeah, I
that I
studied abroad there. I studied
mm,
abroad in Spain, so it was. I did an internship in DC for the Attorney
okay.
General's office for District Columbia,
Wow.
but that was right before I did them back to back.
Hmm. Well, that must have been a very interesting time and great opportunity, I guess, to be over in Barcelona. It's a beautiful city.
Yeah, it's
There
gorgeous.
some years ago on vacation. It's a great city. Yeah, I really loved it. And so then you attended law school at UC Davis, came up to Sacramento.
Yeah, I did a gap year after UCSB and down here in San Diego.
Hmm.
Um, I was actually accepted at USD, and probably good thing I didn't stay in San Diego for law school.
Yeah,
But UC Davis ended up shooting up in the rankings and
yeah.
ended up heading back home up to Sacramento for law school.
Yeah,
So,
I remember when I applied to law school and I got into Pepperdine, and I knew that if I went to Pepperdine, I would never go to class. I would spend all day surfing. So,
Yeah,
I wound up at Santa Clara, because I just know myself well enough to know where my limitations were. So,
that's
so
cool.
Dan, your parents are physicians,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
you decided to pursue a career in law. So tell me about that. At what point
yeah.
in your undergraduate uh, years did you decide that you were not going to follow your parents?
I think early on, my mom, unfortunately, it was like one of those things that sticks in your memory. But she was working on a blender, making some smoothies for the family back in the day, and the the knife, the kind of ninja star that's in the center of that thing, ended up coming out and flung at her, and it ended up severing her digital nerve in her finger, and she ended up losing a lot of movement in two of these fingers, right? And I remember at that point in time, my mom was even saying, oh man, you took over and you got me to the hospital and you did such a great job and you were so interested in what the doctors were saying about X, Y, and Z. And I was like, well, what happened to the blender? She was very pumped about me and the medicine stuff. And I was like, well, I want to figure out what went wrong over here
Right,
instead. And I
right.
think that's kind of where the
I
personal
see.
injury legal angle kind of started coming in. Funny story, the doctor, my brother, the incumbent doctor in the family, he actually took a bat to the blender in the backyard, which it was kind of the next thing was like, dude, you're not supposed to do that, after these types of events. So it just kind of made sense after that the
Yeah,
legal way was going to be my calling, and I've always had a knack for arguing and talking too much. So that's the direction I took.
interesting. And how was your experience at law school?
It was great.
Yeah.
Had a great class, a really special class that I went to law school with. Made some lifelong friends and
Hmm.
people that I just got back from a wedding for one of them where we had pretty much like a small law school reunion with
Right.
everybody. And so love the people I met there. Obviously got a top-notch education there, and my personal views on taking the bar and otherwise, you're surrounded by pretty high level talented people that are pushing each other, and I crushed the bar as a result of it. I walked out of the bar going, if I failed that thing, I wasn't meant to be a lawyer, because I think I did really well on it. So I know that's all possible because just the people you surround yourself with at that time
Mhm.
period.
So you graduated from UC Davis School of Law, and you then get a job in the Sacramento District Attorney's Office.
Yes, sir.
So
Yeah.
why
So
did you pick going to the DA's office? Uh, I mean, what was the motivation there?
I always knew I wanted to be a trial attorney. I throughout law school, it was all about getting opportunities to speak, being in front of people, getting those nerves out, getting experience, just talking, without hesitating too much or, being able to present to other people. And that was always my calling. I always loved because I grew up with ADHD as a kid, so I was kind of all over the place a little bit. And what I found, especially in mock trial, moot court, those types of things in law school, I knew law review wasn't for me. I knew big law was not for me. Those weren't my callings. It wasn't to go and, work 70, 80 hours a week just to chase a paycheck. It was, hey, I want to make a difference and I want to have a skill set that I know is mine.
Mhm.
Right. And I discovered that in law school, and I was able to do all those programs that, UC Davis provided. And, I think I would say I excelled in them. I really found a love and a joy for it. And so with the DA's office, it was that next step, right? I think you ask any real trial attorney how you get the best experience, the quickest way is to go to PD or DA's office, get in the grind, and um, really invest yourself in that type of experience. So I ended up going that route.
But you
I'd been,
didn't stay very long.
no, for me, it was kind of a matter of what I wanted long term in terms of flexibility. I'd be lying if I said the paycheck didn't start, become a little bit more appealing on the private sector and the private side. I got in, I tried a lot of cases very quickly. Had some really great people that I worked with there. But it, I always had a mentor in Sacramento. His name was Roger Dreyer. Is Roger Dreyer, the Roger Dreyer, and he brought me up through law school and different experiences I had along the way. And he said, "Man, go and try as many cases as you can, and you ever need a spot or a next step, come talk to me." So that's pretty much the direction I went after that. Was I went in, tried a lot of cases. Um, the government work just wasn't the right fit for me long term. So, and I had the benefit of having a mentor like, Roger Dreyer, who opened me up to civil practice on the private
And it
side.
looks like you stayed with him for about what, three years or so.
Yeah, about 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, during my dad he's a spine surgeon. He worked his butt off for years, and he's a pretty well-known spine surgeon up in Sacramento. And I don't want to say he worked himself into a heart attack or anything, and I hope you cut that out. But he ended up having a congenital heart issue that
Mm.
was inflamed, and he had to have open heart surgery. And kind of a pillar in my life, where family is obviously a big deal for me in my life, and I have a very tight knit family. And I kind of sat there and was like, okay, he's living down in San Diego. My mom's living down in San Diego. You don't know how much time you got. And my wife also, she grew up in Sacramento. She went to St. Francis. I went to Jesuit. We were
Okay.
both Sacramento kids.
Yeah.
Um, we've been together 15 years now, but I met her at UC Davis Law School, and she always wanted to go to LA or New York or something like that. And I was like, I can't keep, this is a great reason to go down to San Diego of all places. Is my parents live down there. We're young enough. We can have a fresh start down there to, really grow a family and be around my parents and still have that connection to Sacramento. So that's the route we took.
So
Is your
your
wife?
wife's a practicing attorney?
No, thank God, no. But no, she's a product manager for a medical software company. But
Okay.
she's yeah, we met when she was her fifth year at UC Davis. She ended up going to business school at UC Davis. She finished school for her graduate degree for business school, got her MBA, and all the stars just kind of aligned, and it was like, okay, if we're ever gonna go on an adventure and try something outside of what we grew up with and kind of colored outside the lines, so to speak, now's the time, and now's the right time, especially when my dad was going through what he was going through.
Mm. How's he doing now?
Oh, he's fantastic. I mean,
That's good.
he became vegan after that. He
Yeah.
lost 20 pounds. I mean, the guy golfs twice a week. He's doing fantastic. I mean, it's really one of those types of like miracle stories, because you see what those kind of surgeries can do, and
Mm.
how weak people are after that, and you
Absolutely.
always
Yeah.
go, are how much. And I know it's in his head at times. It's like, oh, you never know how much time is left. I want to spend as much time I can with my family. And man, the guy has just followed that dream. It's been a really good. I mean, guy made an incredible recovery from the whole thing. So
That's good to hear. So
yeah.
you transitioned down to San Diego to be with the family, be with your parents, and how'd you find your next how did you end up where the firm you went to work with
Yeah,
down in
well,
San Diego?
that was one of the other things when I was working with Roger, is one of those types of jobs which it's very lucrative, very good, prestigious firm. And I knew where my life was going to go there, right? And I knew I was going to be in that role for probably my entire career if we had stayed in Sacramento. And I always wanted to see, if the grass was greener on the other side. I always wanted to be a business owner. I always wanted to start a business. I always wanted to go through the experience of being self-sufficient and, hunting down your own food, so to speak. And so that was my opportunity to do it, and I ended up joining up with a couple of law school buddies of mine that were a grade older than me, that they needed a litigator for a business law firm that we started in Sacramento. It also allowed me to be remote, quote unquote, remote before it was fashionable, right?
Hmm.
And I started a satellite office down in San Diego during that time. Um, and worked with those transactional guys, worked through a ton of different types of cases. Um, and then I realized business law wasn't really my gig. You know, I realized relatively quickly that one, transactional attorneys and trial attorneys, litigators are two very different types of attorneys. Um, I know that if a client told me that it wasn't about the money, it probably meant I was never getting paid in the business world. And then it was, I just miss being in the courtroom. In that period in business law, you realize that when business cases are going to trial, it's usually because somebody's being a jerk or because somebody's being stupid, right? And with those two principles in mind, because it's pretty rare and risky and very expensive to go to trial in the business realm, I quickly realized that I wasn't going to get to trial as much as I wanted to, right? So I was able to get through that period and come to that realization, and I wanted to go back into personal injury practice so I could get those experiences again. And the clientele for me, in terms of people being in a position where they're vulnerable for reasons that aren't just related to money. And obviously that's what we do in the personal injury field. But, I'm also people's, counselor. I'm their last, their person they're relying on to recover from these events and, you know, develop really strong bonds and friendships around that. And it was different than,
Yeah.
Hey, this guy didn't pay me according to this
Right.
contract, or we had this unreasonable business divorce, or those types of issues.
Yeah. So I guess you have a tremendous impact on the lives of your clients, right?
I like to think so.
Yeah.
I've been through some really really amazing experiences along the way, and I've been very fortunate along the way to not have to just stick in one area and one experience. I've been
Mhm.
able to enjoy a lot of different platforms and a lot of different places. And um, the way I've done it is I've gotten good cases, and I've when I've gotten those cases, I've made those bonds with the client, and I've gone really deep. So
Yeah.
you ask my wife, maybe she would say too deep at times. You get too attached. But I was able to really hit it out of the park for several clients very early on in my career that gave me a lot of flexibility for ever since.
Interesting. So after you were with that business firm, it looks like you opened up with a couple partners down in San Diego, uh, a personal injury firm. Is that?
So that was the beginning of COVID. We all know how crazy that period was as well. And I had a really big case that I had received from a prior client of mine, a guy that had been picking up food for his food closet. He was 72 years old at the time. And he retired. I mean, all he does is service. He lived up in Lincoln, and I mean, just an all around amazing, great dude. And he was picking up food for his food closet one day, and he's at this food warehouse, and somebody's going by with a bunch of boxes of rotten bananas stacked up, and they fell over onto him, and he collapsed on him, about 400 pounds of bananas, and severed his spinal cord. So, he ended up being a partial paraplegic. And I got the case in September. Um, Ended up going and getting a couple wedding videographers to do a very, very impactful, I call it a Netflix documentary, but we technically call them settlement documentaries. But the team that I got to do this thing for them was really incredible, and we pursued it very aggressively. Um, Before settlement, got him a $120,000 handicap vehicle. He went through it. I mean, the guy is a total trooper. He started actually walking again within 6 or 7 months, even though he's deemed a partial paraplegic. Um, and we were able to get a resolution for him in 8 months, 9 months, right at the beginning of COVID. I think COVID started around end of February, early March, and we resolved it in May, and we were able to get him $7.5 million. And about that time, the guys I was working with, close friends of mine, Jeff Hammer and Justin Gingery, they had also worked at Dryer Babbage law firm, and we were like, hey, the world's going to hell. Should we team up together and weather this storm together and see if we can build a multi-regional practice and go from there?
So now you're an owner, you're a
Yeah,
partner.
yeah. So I was a partner with them for 4 years, and I ended up jumping recently to another practice down here in San Diego. That was more because I had a couple of kids now, and it gets a little more and more difficult to travel up to Northern California as much as you could. I was heading up to Sacramento about 30 times a friggin' year. So I mean, that might be a slight exaggeration. It was probably about once or twice a month though. And after a certain period, you're like, okay, you got to keep the wife alive as well.
Right.
you know, mistakes
So
were made. These
yeah,
kids are 14 months apart.
that's right. And
Yeah,
they grow up fast. They
and
grow
they
up
grow up
fast.
very
They grow up
fast.
fast.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did that partnership end up dissolving, or are the other two founding partners running it?
They're still running it up in Sacramento,
Hmm.
doing really well, and great guys. And we ended up parting ways earlier this year, and yeah, it was just one of those things where we kind of all saw the writing on the wall in terms of how we had built the firm and where our strong suits were in terms of bringing in cases and how we were going to bring in cases regionally and all those issues that any business deals with. And we ended up parting ways, and I came over to the Bata Fulkerson firm because really I tried last year or over the last 2 years. I, I I had 7 adjudications. And one of the things I realized, especially in towns like Sacramento and San Diego, I think you guys would agree, really tight knit towns. They're very um, I don't want to say we're not LA. I don't know if I don't want to hate on LA. I'm a Sacramento Kings fan and I hate the Lakers, but that's a different story for a different day, maybe. But I think you guys would probably agree. Knowing Sacramento and those types of areas, they're very local based, very locals based, and it's
Yes.
very protected around reputation, relationship building.
Yeah.
Um, you
Well, they're
know,
small communities.
they're
And
small, yeah.
know
And
each other.
exactly. San Diego's more of like a big city now. It's gotten wild here in the last 4 or 5 years, but it's a small town in a big city. It's a blue collar town. It started as a military town, so it still got that vibe. And it was one of those things where it was like, okay, I'm in my late 30s now. I'm taking that next step of my career. I need to you need to have those relationships with the local judges. You need to be invested in those relationships in the local judges, yeah, the local professionals, and you have to have your reputation being ingrained with where you're based out of. And I think that was partially eye-opening for me as well. I've always been able to bring in cases and bring in good cases, big cases, and have been able to have the benefit of being selective about what I take on or don't take on. Um, and part of, this change for me was, hey, if I'm gonna be the trial attorney I want to be, I need to have an intensely local presence. And you know, part of that is specialization, working with Bata Fulkerson. Um, I'm all litigation now. When I was with my prior group, it was, wearing a lot of different hats, doing a lot of different things. And, part of what I wanted to do, especially after trying all these cases, and, I've done about altogether, including criminal, I've done somewhere between 25, 30 of these things over the years between binding arbitrations, bench trials, and jury trials. Um, you need to be present where you're practicing, you know? And I know people have a lot of different thoughts on that. Not every industry is the same.
Well,
I
you're
did not.
definitely at a disadvantage when you go into a jurisdiction that you're not known, or you don't know the players. I mean, I last year I did a trial in San Luis Obispo, and I didn't know any of the players.
Mm,
And uh, yeah, I mean, every jurisdiction does things differently, and every judge does things differently. So it definitely there's definitely an advantage to one niching your practice into a specific area, but two knowing who all the players are.
right, right. And for me, it was I want to get in the courtroom as much as I can.
Yeah.
That's my game. That's my love, my professional love. And um, you know, being with the Bata Fulkerson guys, I get a lot of cases. I still bring in a ton of my own, and I get to kind of enjoy all the benefits of firm ownership without all the hassle. And you also get this very, very well branded, well marketed local presence with, they have a very talented group of young litigation attorneys here because this is, the firm is also in a very special place in its growth. They've been around 6, 7 years now, growing out the litigation practice. Everybody's, in terms of, lawyer speak is on the younger side, young, hungry, and ready to go out there and do their thing. And, it's been a really great experience being here since I made the change.
And I guess that's been helpful for you because it sounds like they are entrenched in the community, right?
Oh yeah, big time. And,
Yeah.
entrenched in trial, right?
Yeah.
So, and the practice of trial practice. So,
So what drew you to them? Had you looked at other firms down there?
yeah, I checked out other firms over time. I've had a lot of different platforms and experiences that I think that in itself is pretty unique, as an attorney, is to be able to go and, you know, volitionally, try these different types of practices and, presentations of ownership or, associate or partner. And for me, I wanted a place that was young, hungry, and, stands by what they do,
Yeah.
right?
Like-minded people.
Like-minded people and,
Yeah.
in similar progressions and,
Hmm.
want want to accomplish the same things in terms of not just their career but from start to finish, how do we get the best result for our client, right?
Yeah.
And
Daniel,
for
let me ask you
yeah,
a question because one of the things that I find interesting in your journey is that you have moved around quite a bit.
yeah.
When I was I mean I started practicing in 1985, so it's been a long time, right? But in those days you didn't move. I mean I was a public defender for 17 years. I worked in a firm for 6, and then I owned my own firm for over 20. Uh,
Hmm.
but that seems to have changed now. People tend to move around, and we've talked to other lawyers who say, one of the challenges of getting good lawyers is that they don't stay.
Mm.
So I'm wondering if you could if you have a thought on that or can comment on that. Uh,
Yeah, the best I could say on that, because I don't want to speak for anybody else, and I don't want to say, oh, this is a millennial thing or anything like that, because I don't think that's the box I fit into. I think, it kind of goes back to what I was saying for me personally earlier is life's an adventure and live it. And the experiences, for me during my late 20s and 30s, they've built to this point, which is, finding what you want to do until you retire and live the rest of your life and find your professional love. And, for me, I've been able to now, you know, I've been able to try big cases. I've been able to stand next to the pillars of, the practice. And I've been able to own my own practice, call my own shots, and, ultimately now be with, what I would call a family of like-minded individuals that all want to accomplish the same thing, while still providing, this feeling that I'm still running my own practice. Um, and so for me, I think it's a little bit different. It's definitely, not preferable to jump around to different practices and things like that. But, I've been able to romanticize it a little bit over time. Um, and for me, like I said, I think it's kind of circumstantial. It's what are you going to look back on in life and go, hey, these are the experiences I had. I think because of what I've been able to do and how I've done it, I've had experiences that most attorneys don't even get in their entire career. I've tried multiple wrongful death trials. I've gotten seven-figure resolutions. Um, I've had wins, losses, and I've tried, almost 30 cases. So I, in both the civil and criminal realm, so it's, for me, that's, you know, I, I like the picture I've painted here in terms of, my career.
Well, let me ask you about so your classmates, because it sounds like you've stayed fairly close with your class. Um, because we get a snapshot. People get a snapshot
Sure.
of, oh, lawyers keep moving, and I know that was my experience with our firm. We'd hire somebody, and then 24 months later they're leaving for, not because they didn't like the firm, but because they just decided it was just kind of part of their game plan. Have you seen that with your colleagues? Is that a,
We haven't really, I guess the common theme is always just forward progression,
Mhm.
but I think everybody's always got their own view of what they want in a career and how they want to make money and how they want to live their lives. And I think, that also changes with different experiences. For me, it was having kids. I was like, okay, where do I want to spend, choice wise most of my time? I want to spend time with my kids. It changed my life having kids. And I know that goes for everybody. I'm not special in that regard, but I think more of the conversations for people that have moved around or changed different offices, it's probably similar to what I've talked to you guys about, which is, the experience, the life experience. Where can I get the most experience? Sometimes it also just comes down to, this place that I went to has been around for a long time and they're set in their ways, and I'm never really going to have an impact at this point in changing those ways. Yeah, so I know that factors into it as well. But I don't know if there's any one direct reason. And, I have tons of colleagues that, they are doing the traditional way. They have worked the same job. I know a lot of PDs and DAs that have done it because of loan forgiveness. So they've stayed in certain areas for longer periods of time. I've got other, friends, colleagues that, you know, get tired of the workload in certain areas, have kids, and, you know, the workload was never an issue for me. I've always kind of been trained to go and add more and more and more to the pile. But I know all that stuff factors in. I was talking to a friend the other day who, she was talking to me about whether or not she's getting offered to become an equity partner. She's a non-equity partner right now, and she's like, I don't think I want to be an equity partner. And I'm like, why is that? And she's like, well, it's just a different vibe. It's a different game. And I know right now I just want to be with my 3-year-old. And I know that'll take away from it, especially as, a single mom. So it's, I think everybody's got their own reasons, and maybe it is a part and partial to changing of the tide and, maybe changing of the guard related to the age of some of these firms. Because, I know a lot of old firms that aren't changing the way they've done business. This is the way they've done it since the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. And, they see things like remote work. They see things like, even remote hearings, right? And they go, we don't participate in that. And I know that pushes people a certain way as well.
Well, and
Dana, how do
I
you,
think the jury's still out on that question of whether or not this remote situation is really good or bad for the practice.
I don't like it. I don't like it.
I have
I'm not a
mixed
fan.
feelings.
And I've lived it. I've done a satellite office to a growing satellite office down here in San Diego, with The GHS guys, we had, 12 people up in, or 12 or 13 up in Sacramento, and we had three down here, including myself. And it's still a remote practice. I think you need to have attorneys in the same room together. You need to have collaboration. You need to bounce ideas off each other. It's just not even as fun if you don't have that, you know?
Right. I mean, I always felt the same way, but there definitely is a lot of pressure to allow for remote working. And I'm not opposed to it per se. I just know for me, I have so many distractions in my house, or in my home office that it is just hard to be focused.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
Dan, how do you envision your forward progression?
Uh, I want to, I mean, first and foremost, I want to keep trying cases. I want to keep getting more and more value for my clients, and I want that to continue to trickle like it has over the years into getting,
Mhm.
more and more selective about the cases that I take on, that I handle. Kind of the Jerry Maguire moment, so to speak, in terms of really being able to put in all your effort into, cases because, and I'm sure you would agree, Mike, it's pretty common, especially in personal injury in today's practice, uh, to you're not really fully litigating all these cases. If you're having a big pile on your desk, you're not able to get into the real nitty gritty of people's lives or go to their houses and see what, where they're living, how they're living, photos of their friends,
not
family,
every case can
parents.
justify that either, right? I
Yeah, of course.
mean, even
Right.
if you have a bad injury, if you don't have a deep pocket to reach into, I mean, at the end of the day, as much as it's unfortunate, it is a numbers game,
Sure.
and if you're not making, if you're not getting your client, good money and you're not making any money, it doesn't make any sense to move forward.
Exactly. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. And that's probably something I left out earlier. It's when, especially in today's practice, and I'm sure we're all pulling up LinkedIn every day, every other day or whatever, and seeing like the magnitude of legal marketing that's out there right now, and especially with AI. And I've never been a huge marketer. The practice I am in now, the partners here are phenomenal business guys, very very elite, get cases in the door type guys. Um, it's hard to go and actually have the opportunities, if not impossible these days, unless you get very lucky. And I've been fortunate to be lucky like that. It's hard to get into the courtroom, into trial, unless you got, 50 to 100 cases on your desk.
Mhm.
And, as a smaller practice group, as a smaller firm, you got to make sure you're keeping that rotation going and you're making sure you're bringing all those cases in because you can't really pick and choose which is going to be the big one necessarily. Right. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, almost like a catch 22. You want to be a trial attorney, you want to be in the courtroom, but you also got to be hitting the streets and bringing in cases. Right. So,
Well, and you also, in your practice area of personal injury, you got to keep an eye on your investment, right? Because at the end of the day, you're paying the freight until the case resolves,
right.
right? So it's, I've seen and I've worked with other lawyers who, went all in on a case and it didn't go well and
Sure.
swept them.
Oh,
Because
I've had those as well. Yeah, I've had those as well, and they're heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
They'll carve your heart out of your chest,
Mhm.
especially when you truly believe in them.
Mhm.
I had a really wild one last year, really sad case, with a couple that was staying on a boat at a marina down here in San Diego. At the beginning of COVID, one of the hotels shut down the hotel. They didn't shut down the marina, and the city moved in, 1,300 homeless people right next door to this place. Hotel was supposed to be providing security. They very clearly were not. But my clients had signed an exculpatory waiver to house their boat there. So you could only go after gross negligence. Well, one of these nights, one of the homeless gentlemen, so to speak, ended up going onto the boat and sexually assaulting my client as she was sleeping next to her husband. Um, Really crazy incident, obviously a life-changing experience for her. But we ended up losing that one on gross negligence at trial. And, that's one that I carried for 3 years. And, you put 150K into it and, it doesn't turn out. That happens. That's part of the algebra. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dan, yeah, I'm sorry.
I'll just say that's unfortunate, but it's part of your business model, right?
yeah.
You've got to account for, you don't win them all. I mean, and that is a tough case when you're talking about gross negligence,
Mhm.
somebody else's intentional criminal conduct.
hmm Third party culpability, all that, everything wrapped into one. That's one where I look back and I'm like, God, should I have bifurcated that thing? But then, you bifurcate it and you lose on the bifurcation issue. You're never going to then it's definitely going to trial, you
Right.
know?
Right.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword sometimes again, but, those are the calls we make.
Yeah. Yeah. Experiences, lessons learned, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
had great,
let's talk.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So I
I was
did have
just,
a question on so you went from, basically being a partner, even though it was kind of a remote situation, to going back to and I don't mean to say this in a derogatory way, but to be an employee,
Yeah.
right? So, how do you feel about that? I mean, most people go the other way.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's a very contextual experience, it's hard it's hard to, sit here and say that this fits in any clean box or anything like that. This is was a choice that I made after meeting with these guys, talking with these guys about their goals, expectations, the similarities that we share. And, they treated me very, very well coming in and, brought me into the family and the scope of the family here. And you come into the doors and you see what's under the hood and you're like, man, that, that looks like home. I want to be a part of that, type of experience here. I think that's what these guys are going for as well, is just, they don't have those types of strict classifications, traditional type of classifications. I'm a senior trial attorney over here. That's my job. I'm a trial attorney. I can still run my own practice out of the firm. And it's a really, you know, I wouldn't have done it if it didn't make sense. It's like one of those types of things. And it alleviates pressure in certain places, and it makes you sharper and better at the stuff you want to be better at in other places. So, for me right now, I definitely appreciate what you're saying, and that's always consideration. Um, because the traditional way is to go business ownership. But, I've had those opportunities. And for me, especially in San Diego and what I want to do with my practice, this definitely made the most sense.
Right. Well, and owning your own practice is a huge time commitment on a whole variety of you know, I mean, there's just more that has to be done because you're literally running a business,
Sure.
opposed
You
to
know,
just
this
practice.
feels this feels like I'm part of the growth and storyline. This is a younger firm that's had a lot of success. They've got a great business plan for the future, and they help a lot of people. And I think that's the primary goal at the end of the day. That's all they'll ever talk about is, as long as the client's happy, man. The client's got to be happy at the end of the day. That's what we're here to do this for. And it's a special practice. So
Daniel, elaborate on how you're able to also run your own personal practice
yeah,
out of
so
that firm.
well, I won't get into like all the nitty gritty business detail stuff, but just in terms of how they um, compensate, treat, you know, reward, bringing in cases, reward your reputation, and how you generate cash flow. All those things are very positive here and very respected here across
Okay.
the attorneys. Um, it's It's definitely a situation that I think is uncommon in the practice. I've been at a lot of different places, and I don't want to, get into everybody else's dirty laundry or how stuff people are compensated and otherwise, but I'm sure Mike can attest to that. It's not always clear how you're going to get compensated.
Right.
The water can be kind of murky. This place is very much not that. Where I'm at right now, I think that's what they've endeavored to do and break out to do is to create a situation where everybody, feels like they are part of the team, part of the firm, while also reaping the rewards for their hard work of bringing in
Mhm.
cases and what they're able to achieve in the courtroom.
Right. So Daniel, I have a question, and maybe you don't have an opinion on this, but there's been a real movement across the country to allow non-lawyer ownership.
Yeah, I hate it. Yeah,
Okay.
Oh, we
Um,
know the
it
opinion.
hasn't hit California yet, but
it's
I
gonna.
I think it's going to. I think the writing's on the wall. Um, so what is it that you don't like about it, and do you think that there's any advantages to it?
It's a really complicated question because I don't think it's going to be an overnight change.
Mhm.
You know, I it's you look I and I've been practicing for about 11, 12 years now, so it's like I'm not the the what's the word? I'm not like the figurehead to talk about this necessarily because I haven't been around the block as some of, the wiser and more aged attorneys that have seen all the different inflection points in the practice of law over the years. But from my experience, um, nothing in terms of legal change happens overnight.
Right.
When they try and make changes overnight, it's always met with resistance. And typically, how I have looked at some of the state bars ventures into this area, uh, were somewhat misguided. And I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but I don't think you encourage change by saying this has the possibility of taking your job away. And I know nobody's coming out and saying that, but that's the reality, right? You're talking about estate planning. Now we're dealing with AI. Now we're dealing with all these different corporate enterprises with corporate processes and otherwise. We can say all we want all day on the attorney side that, you know, there's going to be a loss of decision making, judgment, discretion. I have found in the practice a lot that process and procedure improves the practice a lot. So that I guess would be a plus side of that type of change. But I think it's got limitations,
Right.
right? It could be good for certain things. And I'm sure if I name drop any industry of the law right now and somebody listening to this would go, dude, that dude doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. So I don't want to go into that, but I think there's definitely low hanging fruit where opening up the practice a lot to be more accessible in certain respects to corporate actors that are capable of providing, access to the law, access to justice for a lower price. That's not necessarily a bad thing, right? However, if I'm being completely honest, the the way it's been approached to date has very much left the doors open for a much more unbridled like approach to this whole thing. For example, the marketing stuff, the advertising, the way that we already see a lot of legal marketers circumventing the existing rules right now. I certainly see a lot, and I know billboards have been along for a long time, but there's a lot of billboards and variations of billboards and all those different types of stuff that I have not seen the state bar do a very good job at regulating. You know, I was trained that, you know, big marketing and it typically doesn't lead to the best attorneys and the best attorney representation.
No, no.
Um,
Marketing and your skill sets are totally separate.
yeah, I think taking away, if they were to graduate it into certain issues, certain areas that, certain companies call it Amazon law, right? Can put together a process and procedure that creates a customized estate package for you that's very, very cheap or something like that. Yeah, I mean, that kind of makes sense, right? Especially if there's some type of redundancy there where you're getting an actual attorney at the end stage reviewing everything and providing their discretion and judgment. But, you know, this whole thing about we're going to just allow the unlicensed practice of law carte blanche, which is that's how I've taken it. I don't know how you've taken it, Mike, but it's been a very strong push for this.
Right.
Like,
Well,
I think
then it
it
becomes
would
about
turn into the
money.
Wild West. It's all about money,
Right. It all becomes about money. So
Yeah.
the stockholders of the corporation that owns this now, all they care about is your quarterlies. And,
Mhm.
if they really, in my view, if people really wanted to give more folks access, pro bono has existed for a long time, and there is ways that you can support pro bono work without changing the ownership. But the combination of non-lawyer ownership and AI, it concerns me. It
I,
concerns me.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. I think
So,
also it's a little bit of a sneak attack. I think it's, hey, we're bringing it in under, one shade, but it's really just a cover for carte blanche. You know,
so
that's how I personally feel. I don't know. I know a lot of people would maybe attack the accuracy of that, especially at the state bar, and we could probably talk about this for hours. But
Right.
you know,
I mean, the one
I would,
advantage that I do see to it is right now, if you're a lawyer, especially if you're trying to start a firm, the only access to money you have is whatever you've got in your pocket, right? Or
sure.
whatever loans you can take out, which is not a good way to start a practice, in my view. So it would allow for funding that may not otherwise exist, but that's the only positive that I really see for it.
so
In
do
my
you see do you see similar to what's happening in other industries, the big private equity firms coming in and starting to buy up practices?
Absolutely.
Well, and so Arizona and Utah, have what they call the sandbox, and they're allowing that to a certain extent. I don't know anyone, I haven't spoken to anyone from either one of those states about how, on the ground it's actually affecting them.
Mm.
But I agree with Daniel. I think it's a Pandora's box in a lot of ways. Um, not only the ethical issues, but um, as you've eloquently stated, Daniel, at the end of the day, your job as a lawyer is to make sure your client gets the best outcome that they can in whatever practice area. And if a corporation is investing, what they want is return. Otherwise, it makes no sense, right? To
Hmm.
invest in a business if you're not going to get a return. And when that becomes the primary focus, then I think you got problems.
And it will. I know I'm just the greedy ambulance chaser over here, but you look at how the insurance industry has evolved over the years. When when the last time med mal rates were going up, not this most recent time, which, fortunately there has been some changes to account for inflation now, or at least they're working on it, right? Um, it, you would go and see the number on the ballot. I forget the exact prop that was about like 8 or 9 years ago that came up to increase med mal non-economic damage caps from 250, which was set in like 1973 or something like that, to account for inflation and increase. Uh, what do you see at the Giants World Series ball game? You see, oh, this corporation, that corporation's against it. You see 26 newspapers, all the doctors are against it, and you go like, well, okay, how is all this stuff connected? You
Mhm.
know, and you look in my industry, and it's like you got the health insurance, you got auto insurance, still at 15,000, which is crazy. and then the subrogation insurance, uh, carriers are able to claw back actual medical benefits that have been paid out to a consumer when a third party has injured them, right? Well, the consumer doesn't get their deductible back, right? How has that web like formed over the years? I think there's a lot of parallels to how we're going to see this tech stuff and the AI stuff and the corporatizing of law take place. You'll have legal funding, you'll have the legal tech, you'll have it tied in eventually with the court systems and some unified court systems. It's going to get that tangled web where the lines are going to start to blur a little bit.
Well, and you may very well have significant conflicts of interest. I mean, if an insurance company is
Oh,
funding,
really? You think? Yeah, right.
you know,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, the impetus is to not push, right? I mean, because
right,
the way you get good resolutions is to push back, right?
right.
You just don't take the first offer that rolls through the door.
Sure.
So
The adversarial system, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Daniel,
Anyway,
really enjoyed the time spent with you today
Yeah, of
and
course.
learning more
Thanks.
about you and your
Yeah.
story and your journey.
Well,
Thanks
thanks
so
for having
much.
me, guys. Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
been great.
yeah. Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Sunrise and the early bird rock me to my senses. It's a chilly wind this morning, not a cloud in the sky. Today I walk the ancient trails among the petroglyphs and cactus, and I hope